Hello, Hive. I'm coming to you just a wee bit late to talk about the next chapter of Mudhouse Sabbath. And so this week we talked about weddings. So what I want to do is just talk a wee bit about the chapter, hear what you thought, and then just offer a little bit of like real check-in time and reflection, because I think we all could use a little bit of that right now. So before we get started, I have my candle, because like in our last chapter, we talked about how these are really helpful, right? So I invite you to just close your eyes for a moment and just breathe. And breathe in goodness and breathe out the crap. Breathe in the good. Breathe out the bad. All right. So this chapter was really cool. I liked it because I think for me, to be really honest with you, I haven't been to many, if any, Jewish weddings, and my perception of them are pretty wrapped up in what I see in pictures and what I see in shows and things like that. And so this was really helpful to me to really understand where a lot of my Jewish friends are coming from in their experience of a wedding, but also just like the theology of a Jewish wedding and a Christian wedding, and kind of looking at those side by side was pretty cool. And it kind of brought up some really important things for me. So one of the things that she brings up that I think both a Jewish wedding and a Christian wedding both share in common is that the community is really important. Marriage is a community endeavor. Hey, Hillary. And she talks about how that works itself out in both a Christian ceremony and a Jewish ceremony. Having participated in and being part of a Christian marriage where I had a Christian wedding ceremony, something that was really important to me that she brought up was this: in the wedding vows, not only are the two who are entering into a marriage together asked questions and making vows to each other, but the community that is gathered is also asked to take a vow to support that couple by saying we will uphold this couple, and that was something that was and remains really important to me in my marriage. But she talks about how that works itself out in a Jewish wedding too, in a Jewish marriage, and I thought it was really cool. So in a Christian wedding, there's a lot of theology about covenant. It's a covenant between two people. It's a covenant between the two people in the community, and she talks a lot about that. She says that in a Jewish ceremony, it's a little bit more like a contract than a covenant, but my impression of it was when you look at the whole, you really see the covenant there too. So she kind of talks about the parts of the wedding. She talks about being under the chuppah, so like the beautiful canopy and what that represents. She says that to gather under it for the couple to get married, it represents their home, it represents their decorated bed covers, and it represents God's love kind of enveloping them, which is really beautiful. And then she talks about the actual contract itself. And then she talks about the breaking of the glass, which is where I really kind of got excited, because to me this is like the imagery that all pops up when I think of a Jewish wedding, is the crushing of the glass. But I never knew what it really meant, other than like, something cool is starting here. And she says that it means several things, and so I just want to kind of hover on that for a minute. She says that the broken glass that the groom crushes under his feet, it's a goblet wrapped in a bag or a packet or something. It warns of the frailty of marriage. It also recalls the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, a somber moment of Jewish history that should be remembered even at the most joyous occasions. Another interpretation holds the loud crunch of glass scares off any demons who might have been hanging around plotting to trip up the wedding party. Still another holds that breaking glass foreshadows the consummation of marriage. I thought that was really cool because I think I only sort of hinted at that last part. But I think it's so beautiful as we've read this book, how the destruction of the temple and how the Jewish people being a people who are united by Sabbath and by place keeps coming up. And that really resonated with me because of what we're doing right now as a world, where we're really like sheltering down as much as we can to be careful. But what that means is so many of us are removed from one another and removed from our sacred places. And so even in our most joyous parts of our day, that doesn't stop being the case. So that I felt that deeply because I don't know about you, but if you're someone who's a person of faith who now, going on 4 weeks probably, for some of us more, for some of us less, you may not have been able to enter into one of your holy spaces. So even when you have a really great day, that's still there. And I think that that's a beautiful part of this book, that's something that the Jewish people never forget. So there was that. But then she talks about the after part of the wedding, which was really cool. In my own tradition and in my own experience of weddings, the after part is just a big party, right? Like there's not necessarily religious details to what you have to do. There's just a lot of traditions that are held, and because people like to do them and people like to pay for them, like the cake and the reception and dancing and all this stuff, but they're all options. But I really liked how she talked about the intentionality of Jewish weddings after the actual ceremony being all about the importance of the community and how it really points to marriage being a community endeavor, like she talked about in the beginning. She talks about right after the ceremony, the couple goes into, and I'm not going to say it right, but this yachad, where it's this moment of privacy in a room. And she says that people who are Orthodox, who are really following the rules, will not have engaged in much, if any, physical contact. So it's like this moment to like kiss and be intimate or what have you, and just how sweet that is. But then after that, they immediately enter back into the reception or whatever. They come back into the crowd. And then she says, again, if you're being very Orthodox and following the rules, there are 7 nights of parties. Like you're not allowed to have sexual relations for 7 days. And so for 7 days, you have all these different parties. It could be a big party. It could be a pizza party. It could be anything. But all of it is about reminding each other that you're part of this community and this community is part of you. And I really thought that was pretty cool. And one of the things that she mentions in it that I have found to be true in my life is, those people who were at my wedding, and I personally had a pretty small wedding. We started out planning this big thing and then kind of tossed it and had a wedding with like 10 people. But those 10 people are pretty crucial to holding me up and to holding up our marriage. I took those we will vows to be pretty serious. And so I'm just curious as you read this, what you thought. Like if you are married, or if you have been married before, is that communal part, or was that communal part important? In the harder parts of your marriage, has that community held you up? She talks about how, your bridesmaid or your friend who was there is going to remind you why you married that person in the first place sometimes. And that's certainly been true in my marriage. I think I'm not dumb enough to think that there haven't been people who've had to remind my husband why he married me. And there have been times when I've needed to look back and remember too, and people have helped me with that. The community has helped me. So I'm curious about that. But then on the other hand, have you been to a wedding, whether no matter what your relationship status is, have you really taken it seriously that when you're going to a wedding, whether it's a Jewish wedding or a Christian wedding or another wedding, that maybe there's something important that you're doing by being there? Like you're not just there to eat their food and to celebrate and to wear pretty clothes, but maybe you're there as part of this holding up of the couple. So I'm just curious what you thought about the chapter, what you liked about it, what stood out to you. Those were things that stood out to me. I really did enjoy it. So there's that. So now, real talk, I'm just wondering how all of you are doing. Because, we're a few weeks into this coronavirus thing, and it's rough, right? Like, reading about marriage while being cooped up and away from a community made me think about how hard it is to be away from your community. I'm super thankful for my family and my spouse, but it's really hard when you don't have those other people around you to kind of check you, right, and to listen to you. So I'm just wondering how all of you are doing. It seems like some days are harder than others and some days are easier than others, but what I'm hearing from a lot of people is this week is kind of set in to be much harder. So I hope that you'll reach out to one of us here on the Hive to post something, message something, comment here, and let us know how you're doing, because we really do. We care very much. All right, well, next week is our last week of this book. It is also Holy Week in the Christian tradition. So I'm actually pretty excited with where we land on this. It's sort of this perfect mix of circumstances, because the last chapter is called Doorposts. And the last chapter talks about the mezuzah, which I know I'm not saying right, but it's the little box that Jewish people will put on their doorpost or near it that has scripture in it and reminds them to pray. And it's a focal point of their home and a focal part of their faith. And so we're going to read that on Tuesday and talk about it. And then my challenge for you after that, and that will lead to our very last time together next Thursday, on Maundy Thursday, would be thinking about creating or actually going out and creating some kind of sacred space for yourself. Many of us are finding our homes to have to be the everything right now. It's where we go to rest if we're an essential worker. It's where we spend our day if we're working from home. It's where we school our children if we have children. It's where we do all of those things for many people whose lives are pretty complicated right now. So next week we're going to read that chapter, and then the challenge will be to create something that grounds you as a sacred space in your home, whether it's on your door, whether you've made an altar in your home or something like that. So that's what we'll talk about next week, and I'm excited about it. All right, be well, check in with another person, check in with 3 other people actually today and tomorrow, and see how they're doing, and make sure you're being honest about how you're doing. Be well, we care about you, and see you later.